Good morning, fellow constitutionalists. These are my morning thoughts for January 6th in the year of our Lord 2016. And we're going to talk about the Bureau of Land Management real quick. Real quick history of the Bureau of Land Management. They were actually formed in 1946 by the combination of a land management and a grazing bureau. And they became the Bureau of Land Management in 1946. And they're operating from some very old laws that we have on the books from almost the founding of the country. The federal government in the original Constitution is only allowed to own the land that Washington, D.C. is sitting on, plus ports and forts, as long as the states give them permissions to have them within the state borders, okay? And that's something that's been in effect since the founding of our country, since the Constitution is setting forth laws. And when Thomas Jefferson was president, they made the Louisiana Purchase. And so there were some laws made there to dispense with the land from the federal government, to go out and survey it. They surveyed Ohio and all these other places, out. They sent, Thomas Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark out to Pacific, and the whole place was mapped, and pretty much our, what they call manifest destiny. We pretty much ended up owning everything out to the Pacific coast, down to the Rio Grande, and up to the Canadian border. But the original laws were put in place to depossess the federal government of this land. It was to revert to the states or be sold to private parties, whatever it was. And they were doing a good job of that up until 1946. 1946 seemed to be a departing point where the federal government started holding on to land and actually starting to decree that other land was actually federal land, whether the people had title to it or not. There's a case down in Texas where the gentlemen, the families had title to the land since 1941. The Bureau of Land Management comes in and says the state should have never issued that title. That wasn't your land. That's federal government land. And my question is, how can the federal government own land when it's unconstitutional for them to do so? So what's happening in Oregon, what's happening down in Texas, what's happening out in the West, and it's like 13 western states that the federal government owns a total of about 700 million acres of land that they shouldn't be owning. So my point in saying all this morning is, if we would just get back to the Constitution, follow the laws that are on the books, that the federal government in the Constitution is not allowed to own land other than what D.C. is sitting on, and forts and ports, there'd be a lot less hassle in the country today. There really would. There'd be a lot less conflict if the federal government would just do what the states intended them to do when they set up the federal government to begin with. These are my morning thoughts for January 6th in the year of our Lord 2016. Have a great day, folks.